A top U.S. diplomat has met with Niger's military leaders in an attempt to end their coup. But acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland said she was denied a meeting with a detained president. Both global and West African leaders are hoping there is still room for mediation with Niger's coup leaders, who earlier this week ignored a deadline to reinstate the ousted president. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, has said that military intervention may be needed to restore democracy. They meet on Thursday to decide on their next move. Earlier, I spoke to DW's Amaka Okoye, who's monitoring the situation from neighbouring Abuja in Nigeria. And she has more on US diplomat Victoria Nuland's visit to Niger to meet with coup leaders.
That's right, about what you've just said. She wasn't able to meet with the deposed president, but what that means is not that all efforts are gone. However, she came out and said there are still options, you know, the windows and doors really feel like are still open for more engagement, which is really what everyone is calling for, both globally, within the region, in Nigeria and outside of Nigeria. You know, people are also pressuring, if you like, ECOWAS, or asking that they engage more in other ways, you know, diplomatic ways to resolve this situation, instead of resorting to the last option, if you like ECOWAS did mention, which is the military intervention. So we are in a situation where we are likely to see more engagement, more talks, maybe in the coming day. And we're beginning to hear terms also like negotiated solutions. So most likely, both sides are going to come to agreement. Hopefully, that's what everybody is pushing for, as opposed to, you know, the option of military intervention, which, by the way, is not out of the table completely.
Now, speaking about this intervention, this ECOWAS ultimatum has passed and we haven't seen any military intervention. What other options do regional and global powers really have to try to end this coup?
I suppose that we're in a situation where there is really no much more option, really, in terms of, apart from really talking and engaging with the people. Experts, according to, you know, what we are hearing, and analysts and those who are on ground, you know, there still needs to be more engagement. Even on the side of the junta, we are also seeing them having conversation with the countries that, you know, are in support of them. Burkina Faso, for instance, Mali, for instance. We are also seeing ECOWAS. There are even suggestions that more, you know, envoys be deployed, you know, more elder statements, for instance, from Nigeria. So there's going to be more engagement. What we are likely going to continue to see until Thursday, as you do know, where there's going to be that summit, another summit that is to hold, to say what is the next move. There's likely to be more of those engagements from both quarters, from the ECOWAS level, from Nigeria's level, also from the junta's level, and of course globally, you know, to see how best they can get intervention in the situation, even as you mentioned that the deadline has passed and it seemed like there is deadlock, really.
DW's Amaka Okoye there reporting. Thank you very much, Amaka. The coup in Niger has also raised some concern over the supply of uranium for nuclear power plants. Niger provides a fifth of the European Union's uranium imports. Until now, it's been a crucial supplier, especially to France. And here's more on the possible effects the coup might have on the international energy mix.
French nuclear reactors at work, producing more than 2/3 of the country's electricity. They need a steady supply of uranium to keep making all that power. Niger is one of France's top 3 uranium suppliers. The coup has raised worries about what might happen to that supply. One problem for France in particular: there's little love on the street for the former colonial power. We have uranium, we have diamonds, we have gold and oil, and we live like slaves. Why should we? We can't accept it. The French must leave. We don't need them to keep us safe. The junta has cut its security cooperation with France and reached out to the Russian-based Wagner Group for security help. Wagner has also provided assistance in neighboring Mali, another former French colony, part of growing Russian influence in Africa. For now, the EU is downplaying any possible disruption.
EU utilities have sufficient inventories of natural uranium to mitigate any short-term supply risks, and for the medium and long term, there are enough deposits on the world market to cover the EU needs. That is something that we have ascertained.
But the coup comes as the EU, including France, is trying to phase out its dependency on Russian uranium. When the EU passed sanctions on Russian oil and gas, it left uranium out. Russia has every interest in keeping it that way. Any threat to supplies from Niger or anywhere else makes it more likely that Russian uranium will continue to play a role.
Well, for some more background on this, let's bring in Ben Goodwin. He's head of analysis at Prism Political Risk Management and joins us from London. Ben, how have the markets responded to the coup in Niger with regard to the uranium supplies?
Well, there has been a spike in the uranium price. Niger supplies about 4% of the world's uranium, so that was inevitable in the spot market. But I think, as your report made clear, there are no immediate supply concerns for European utilities or North American utilities, given the large stockpiles that these countries have. The other thing to be thinking about is, of course, that where is this uranium going to come from in the long term? So we have a situation where the market is very, very tight because there is a lot of demand for uranium thanks to this so-called nuclear renaissance that's happening all across the world. But we are not seeing the introduction of more uranium supplies into the market. So the market is going to remain tight for a long time. And of course, we've got geopolitics to think of.
So prices will remain high. What are the alternatives? Where can people go to shop for uranium?
There are a number of countries around the world, particularly in Africa and in Central Asia. The key supplier in the world is Kazakhstan, which is in Central Asia, and that supplies about 40% of the world's uranium. And this is where the geopolitics come into play. Kazakhstan is bordered by Russia and China, and we see Russia and China very aggressively trying to take control of or gain access to uranium supplies in Central Asia and across the African continent. So taking it back to Niger, while there may be, say, a month's delay in uranium production and exports, or up to 6 months, a year perhaps, that Europe could live with, the real question is, what if the coup plotters decide to move out the French and move in the Russians or the Chinese? That is going to make the market very, very tight for Western utilities. So it's not fair to say right now that there's a global market for uranium. There's very much a market for uranium that Western countries can access, but there's also a growing market that Russia and China controls. And that's the big long-term question that we have to think about.
Could other suppliers, like Canada, for example, ramp up production?
In the short term, I mean, this will be a case of a couple of years, but I think that is the alternative that actually Western countries need to think about to ensure their energy security. We do a lot of work in Central Asia, particularly in Kazakhstan on the uranium sector. We've just seen Kazakhstan, despite the war in Ukraine, sell a 50% share in one of its biggest uranium mines to Russia, and China sign a major uranium supply deal from Kazakhstan to China. Another thing that the report didn't quite make clear, but really needs to be pointed out, is there's a difference between uranium and the nuclear fuel which goes into nuclear power plants. Now, not only is Russia and China increasing their control of uranium production around the world, but Russia is a pivotal producer of nuclear fuel, even producing nuclear fuel that goes into US reactors. So one of the reasons that Russia hasn't been sanctioned in the nuclear industry is not simply because of its control of uranium. In fact, Russia doesn't produce that much uranium at all. It's its control of the production of nuclear fuel. And the Americans in particular are moving very, very quickly to try and increase production capacity for nuclear fuel. But that will take a couple of years.
Are you saying that this will give countries like China and Russia dominance of the nuclear fuel market, at least in the medium term?
Very difficult to say at the moment, but certainly the behavior that we've seen from Russia and China is that uranium that is secured by these countries is not available on the spot market, for example, and is being stockpiled for their own nuclear programs. China wants to build 150 new reactors by 2035. Russia is already actively building reactors around the world. It's one of its key exports. And so we do have to think about not only the global market, but what uranium stocks are available to Western utilities.
Ben Godwin there, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us here on DW News.
Thank you very much.